Hello, we're live. Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast. I'm Chris Garner, joined by my co-host George Aldridge. First off, the reason we're keeping this very quiet is because we are fresh out of the Star Wars Rogue One midnight screening. It's currently almost 4 a.m. here, and there are people asleep in the house, so we're having to keep it at this volume. Hopefully, you can still hear us. But yeah, we're fresh out of the midnight screening, and I can't believe it's been a year since it was Force Awakens, and there's a lot to take in. We both said, we've talked about the movie as we come out, obviously, and there's so much going on right now that I need to see this movie at least another 2 times to process everything.
I think I've got many more trips planned.
Yeah.
After seeing this film, I'm certainly going to make sure there's many more trips planned, which is a good, positive sign, a sign that I wanted to have with this. I love The Force Awakens. I'll say that. You didn't.
No.
That made that review interesting. I think it's safe to say this review is going to be fun because we both fucking loved it.
Yeah, and actually, I do want to say as well, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. If you can check the title below us, we will have a fully spoiler discussion probably at the weekend. We're aiming for. We want to get Phil and Dave back on that from our last Battle of the Brackets one, but we didn't want people jumping on this live stream tonight if they haven't seen it and we accidentally spoil something. So this will be spoiler-free. But yeah, we're both in agreement. But actually, if we talk about the cinema-going experience, we kind of heard other people around at the end of the film, and everyone seemed very mixed on it, or they needed to see it again.
Yeah, it's one of those where obviously this is spoiler-free, so it's so hard. So if there are moments where I kind of phase out, it's because I'm trying not to spoil it for you guys. If you have seen it, then you'll understand exactly what I mean. But I think there are some people saying it's not what I thought. It's different to what I thought it would be. I think with the concept of a spin-off film and being the first one, there are many people who might just be average cinema goers that think it's an outright Star Wars film. There's no Jedi.
Yeah, no.
That's safe to say. So they might have expected 10 lightsabers to appear. Nothing. Confirmed there's no crawl. There is no crawl. That's one minor issue I have with it, but from the first minute, this is something different. This isn't the styles you've seen before. And I think it's going to rub off with a mixed attitude. I don't know its Rotten Tomatoes percentage, but the last time I saw it was 89, which was yesterday. And naturally that will dip slightly. It's not going to be in the 20s like the prequels.
No.
But I can understand if people don't like it. It's going to be very mixed. I need some more time. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I'm going to understand the outcome of this. Obviously, it was different to Force Awakens, but I took into the fact that, okay, it's not that original. One thing I will say about this, new planets.
Loads of new planets, actually.
New species.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new things, and I fucking loved it. Although it's a prequel, and ultimately we do know at the end they're going to steal the Death Star plant. There's so much originality to this. It would have been so easy for them to have just sort of had something happen. I know this is me jumping on with the experience, but I think there are people that expected it to be, oh, if it's a prequel, then they're going to be by Tatooine, and Luke might be in it, or Obi-Wan might be in it, and X, Y, Z, because they know Darth Vader's going to be in it. So why wouldn't everyone else be in it? It's not that type of story. But again, it's going to be very interesting to see the outcome, because we've seen it. UK have it a day early in case you're from America and you currently don't have a clue why we've seen it early. The UK, I think the whole of Europe might have it early. So you're going to have to wait an extra day for us. And we're 5 hours behind to you. So really, this is only just hitting your midnight. It's 4 a.m. here. I am not shattered at all, which is shocking. Then again, I'm used to watching wrestling. But it'll be very interesting seeing the outcomes over the next few days.
Yeah, and there's been reviews on the internet already, specifically like Jeremy Johns and Chris Stuckman. We've stayed away from all reviews, so we get our fresh opinion and we weren't influenced by anything. I think we did that last year as well with Force Awakens. We're always like that with Star Wars. But yeah, so if we talk about the cinema-going experience itself, as you can see, all of this stuff laid out before you is stuff that I bought. I did the same last year. When it's all on offer and it's there, and I'm a mad Star Wars fan, an obsession, you may say, I just sort of caved in and bought everything. Popcorn tubs, drinks cups with figures, special 3D glasses, you name it. I bought it. So it was all part of the atmosphere, though, and there was no one in costume there. But the actual, when we sat down and got in our seats, there was no movie trailers or anything. It was pretty much just straight to the movie, which kind of, although I was grateful that it went straight to the movie, part of the hype is the movie trailers, and you just want in the film to start.
Yeah, with me, if I go to midnight, I just want to see a film. That's not the case anymore. I was very angry to see 10 minutes. The company's View, that's one of the British companies. I was absolutely horrified to have 10 minutes of view adverts and then straight to the film. If you're going to do view adverts, you've got to show your film trailers. So many trailers have come out because they're desperate to attach it to this film. America, they're getting Dunkirk previews to catch our reactions out from earlier on. But the fact they're getting 6-minute Dunkirk prologues and we got view advertising their shameless promotions of £20 off or something like that, it was just different. But it was nice to get into it quicker because obviously you see the film a lot quicker. It's just one of them where it's like, could have been 10 minutes shorter, I think.
Yeah.
But the atmosphere, it was absolutely rammed. My cinema did 5 midnight screenings. They're showing it 22 times across release day. And I don't think our screen was full. However, I think it holds about 300 people. But we saw it in 3D. That's something to say. We'll talk about 3D experience shortly. But I could assure you that the 2D screens would have been full. There were so many people there. It wasn't as busy as Force Awakens. That's naturally the piece. Force Awakens was the event, as is Rogue One. However, the first Star Wars film, it being an episode film in 10 years compared to the first spin-off film, of course it's going to vary to some degree. But it was a very good turnout, and everyone there seemed hyped. A lot of Star Wars t-shirts, stuff like that. And people were chatting about before and after.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what you expect from Star Wars fans. These are the hardcore fans, and we need to take into consideration as well that you just said there were 5 screenings, so there's going to be people divided up into all the screens. I'm sure there was quite a lot of people there. So the plot, for anyone who doesn't know, again, this is spoiler free. This is everything from the trailer. It is a team of rebel fighters trying to steal the Death Star plans, which are the plans that are then transmitted in A New Hope, which Princess Leia has, and we know the rest of the story from there. So the interesting thing with this one, especially it being the first spin-off Star Wars movie, we know the outcome, but we also don't know the journey that gets us there. And that's the great thing about Star Wars fans. Like, someone could be trying to say a spoiler and you just immediately cover your ears, even though you've seen the next film now in the chronological order and you know everything that happens anyway. But no, so if I just sort of like go in with my overall opinions, I was absolutely riveted by this movie. Now, I will say the first 20 minutes or so, I was unsure about it because there's a lot of planet jumping. There's a lot of, we get captions now with planets. That's a new thing introduced in these movies. But it seemed like the plot, it took a while to find its footing and what it really was trying to say. But once it did, the adventure itself and the action, fantastic.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned the crawl. I think this comes down to the first 20 minutes because I'm not going into details. They could have saved 10 minutes and there's not too much exposition, but a lot of dialogue and story could be explained by a crawl. And I know they're trying to divert away from it, but I genuinely think this film needed it. I know that it's based off two lines of the episode 4 crawl, but it was worthy of its own crawl. It's so different to episode 4. It's not what you're expecting. The planet jumping was odd because it, as you said when we were walking back, it felt like Guardians. That's not a bad thing. It's not an amazing thing. It's not like Guardians. Don't think you're going to see a Guardians one, but different planets coming in and out. It's I suppose a more recent cinema like it. And yeah, I suppose once you get past that first 25 minutes, when the story is set in concrete, then it's one hell of an experience. There's so much going on, which I can't talk about, which I can't wait to. But after that first 20 minutes, I always say, if people look at the prequels, the characters meet because they have to. And this isn't about the characters as such, but the whole story happens because of necessity for it to happen, rather than I want this. I've got this scene in my head. So how do I get to this scene? That's to me what the prequels felt like. I thoroughly enjoy the prequels. Whereas this, like, okay, they've got to get there. They've got to get there. It didn't feel like there was any scene where they wrote the story around it. It felt as if it was natural. And I think that's a really important part of storytelling. And they nailed it.
Yeah, and a character as well. I mean, this was balancing a huge cast. And we've got all the characters written down here, which we're going to talk about individually in a minute. But I mean, you said before we hit record, it might be the most impressive ensemble cast Star Wars has ever seen, at least in terms of sheer volume that we can talk about in depth. And performances across the board, I thought, were fantastic. Felicity Jones, who in our predictions video, we both said we were kind of wary on what we'd seen in the trailers with her delivery. Her lines in general were very cringeworthy, even for Star Wars standards. And didn't have a problem with it. Did not have a problem with her character at all. I thought she was a very likable character, very believable character. I guess she's kind of the character you follow, although they do a good job of sort of dividing the screen time between all the members, which I think is important, especially because, it is bringing together this team of rebels working as a unit. But I mean, as the focal point, I thought Felicity Jones really she brought the emotion. She was good in the action. She's headstrong, she's feisty, she stands up for what she believes in, and she didn't do it in a cringeworthy way like the trailers made it out to be.
And she's not like Rey. I like Rey, but it's very easy for them to go, we can have two of the exact same characters. One can be a Jedi, one can be this rogue rebel. Felicity Jones felt very natural. She had an integral story. The story progressed around her. Events happened because of her, and she was a lot better in the trailers. I didn't mind from the trailers, but I said, some of the dialogue was cringy. The I rebel. I hated that from day one. I'm not going to talk about that being in the film, if it made the film. If it didn't, I'm just going to say now. There are several audio clips, visual clips from the trailers that didn't make the final cut. We're not going to say what's what because that will obviously spoil it. You'd expect some things might not happen, vice versa. Some dialogue's cut, some's not. But lines like I rebel, every line she had in the trailer felt like a trailer line, whereas when they're integrated into the film, they're a part of a scene. They delivered different, and ultimately it pays off a lot better. I thought the script was very strong.
Yeah,
there's no cheesy dialogue. There's no awful dialogue. I suppose there's some villain-esque lines. There's some heroic lines. There's some very funny one-liners. I'll say that it's not a comedy, but when they nail the comedy, it is absolutely incredible.
I thought the comedy itself was kept to quite a minimum. There were long periods where you are just sort of like focused on it. Like, it is a serious movie. It's still like a fun adventure movie, don't get me wrong. The action's fantastic, but you are kind of focused on it. And in terms of, I mean, Star Wars, we said this often, that this is the first proper war movie we've had in the franchise, and I think it absolutely is. And the way they delve into like the tone of both sides, the Empire and the Rebellion, there's grey areas on both sides really with it. We can't go into depth much with it, but Galen Erso, for example, played by Mads Mikkelsen, works for the Empire but has a morally grey area, and you can sympathise with him. And even members of the Rebellion itself, who, when you look at the original trilogy, it was very much black and white. You had your good guys, you had your bad guys. This kind of toes the line a bit with like Forrest Whitaker's character, and I like that it went into those areas. There were moments in the film where, again, can't go into detail, but there's a skirmish in like a town, and how it was filmed, and you see like kids crying in the background. It felt like I was watching news footage from things that are happening in our world, like in war-torn countries. I thought it was great how they balanced that tone.
Yeah, and the tone's a key thing because there was the whole drama of they've reshot 30% of the film, something like that. They've had some guy come in and take over from Gareth Edwards. This isn't a Suicide Squad. You watch this film, it flows perfectly. Gareth Edwards has said himself before, I had helping hands. I needed that. I had 2 days worth of footage of action. I wanted to blend a story, blah, blah, blah. Do not be afraid of the reshoots. They fit in perfectly. You don't notice them. You genuinely don't know what's been reshot. There's no obvious wigs like in the episode 3 reshoots. It's one of those where I think if you look at the action, the story, it worked well. If Disney stepped in, it's because they stepped in for the right reasons, and the tone, I think they nailed it. They said from day one, this is going to put the wars in Star Wars. I hate the fact because it's called Star Wars. We already know there's a war, but this is brutal. And by war film, I'm talking there's some violence in this. The more than ones like Fury, Dunkirk won't have violence you've seen like this. There are some epic war films that don't have the action listed, and I think a lot of that will come down to the direction of Gareth Edwards. Look at Godzilla. Granted, it's very different, but when he wanted to sort of go upon the not violence of Godzilla, but when there were some brutal things that included sort of tragedies, people getting squashed, towers falling, he wasn't afraid to deliver on that. And you see this again. He isn't afraid to show violence on screen, not impending. I'm trying not to spoil things. But if people are going to get shot, you can see in a few trailers they're going to get shot. There's one of the tweets from Star Wars. They had a gif of an ATST shooting someone. They straight up show stuff like that, and it's not violent enough. It warrants the 12A certificate. I think it's still PG-13 in America. Yeah. But the tone of it is nothing like the previous Star Wars films. But as you get towards the end, the rumors were always that they need to get the tone down for it to finish. It's got to finish right before it starts. And they get that perfectly. The way it ends, it feels like you can literally just stick that New Hope Blu-ray on right away.
As it, right, what I said to you as soon as it cut to the credits, I said I want to watch A New Hope right now. It is perfect how it does end. We're not going to give away the ending on here, obviously, but you talked about Gareth Edwards' direction. Now, I've said on my previous reaction videos, I've talked about the 2014 Godzilla movie. I wasn't a fan of that movie at all. I found it very boring. However, I say one of the positives of that film was its sense of scale and the shot choices. I mean, I still remember the trailer for that with the skydivers parachuting going past Godzilla, and you just get that glimpse of it. You see how big it is. And Gareth Edwards brings that sense of scale to the battle scenes in this film. Absolutely. When you've got the ground troops with the ACTs,
Yeah,
like walking, you do get some fantastic shot choices. Shot choices we've never seen in Star Wars before. And I've even said, like, I would say cinematically, this is probably up there with the original trilogy. Maybe even surpasses it in terms of its shot choices, and just you feel like you're in the action scenes, like you're watching them as a spectacle, but just the space battles as well as on the ground. It really does feel like a ground warfare movie.
yeah. If you look at the Force Awakens, you've got a lot of tracking shots as such, show things. So there's like the great one of the X-wings taken over, dropping down to Finn. In this, Gareth Edwards, he keeps you on the ground level with the troops. Your perspective is always from their level, similar to Godzilla, like I said. And the way it just works for stars, we haven't seen it like that before. If we get any Star Wars scene, there's always been some gloating long shot. For example, Anakin Obi-Wan fighting on Mustafar, lots of long shots, lots of close-ups. Whereas if that was Gareth Edwards, it would be almost not first person-esque, but you'd feel like you're there.
Yeah.
You felt like you're in the action. There's some brilliant 360-degree sets, which he spoke of. You don't notice a set as much because obviously you're watching a finished film. However, you felt like you're there in the jungles, in the scrap. You feel like you're a part of the action. And that's something I just haven't experienced. Even with Endor, it's a very easy comparison. You don't feel like you're there. You feel like you're watching a film, whereas this, it feels so documentary-esque.
Yeah.
And it works for what they're trying to accomplish in the film. And there's a lot of credit due for that.
And I'm not going to harp on this all the time because I talk about this all the time, but the blend of practical and CGI was fantastic in this film. It really, really was. And this is kind of why I didn't like Force Awakens last time. I've spoken about it before. You can check our review if you scroll through our old videos. I thought it kind of had a lack of originality. It was very much sort of like a soft reboot of A New Hope. This one, although set around the same time as New Hope and did bring in similar elements in terms of the story, there was so much originality to it, to the species, to the planets, which we mentioned earlier. There really was that just driving force for originality. And everything looked great. We'd seen some shots in the trailers of like the space monkey on the turret. Moroff, who really didn't have that much to do in this. He was kind of like the Wampa Wookiee looking thing who I was looking forward to. But even then, like I talked about this with like the original Star Wars, some of the best characters we like from the original Star Wars are the background characters who really don't have much to do. And I'm sure, I mean, you're collecting the trading cards, for example. The figures are out there already. I think that these characters are going to become like fan favorites. And I think the Space Monkey, for example, pretty much already are.
Yeah, there's some brilliant ones. The design is original. I mean, we'll go back to Force Awakens. Sorry to keep jumping back, but here's the new film. There's a lot of new aliens in there, especially on the Jakku stuff. There's also a lot of previously seen aliens. With this, you get such a human focus, but then a lot of the species you see are brand new. And this isn't even new as in expanded universe new. This is stuff I haven't seen before. I loved the design of them. They all have a role. They suit what they're trying to do. And I thoroughly enjoyed what they created for it. I think the creature department at Disney is probably one of their strongest suits at the minute, because anything that's not used on a Star Wars film can get put on the next one.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what they're doing, which is benefiting everyone because it's just adding this depth to the sort of the galaxy, because it's a gigantic galaxy. We've seen a fraction of it, and they're going to keep expanding on that.
And you talked about the human element there. So if we go through the rest of the cast now, talk about the characters. So we've talked about Felicity Jones already. Let's talk Diego Luna as Captain Cassian Andor. You said it was a very, very different interpretation of that character than what you expected. Really, his character is morally grey for most of the movie. And I mean, you showed me some of the interviews he was on Jimmy Kimmel. This guy just oozes charisma, and he absolutely brings that to the film as well. Really likable character, and a character I wanted to know more about. And I can say that for all the characters, not to detract from the film itself. All the characters are fantastic, and you like them all fine. But you want to know more about them. You want to know their histories, and maybe they'll explore that in other novels and comic books later down the line. But this is another reason I want to see this movie again. And I think that was the most pivotal thing this movie had to get right, was you had to care about these rebels and the cause they were going after. If that fell apart, you wouldn't have a movie at all. But everyone perfect, and I'd say Diego Luna's kind of the male lead of this film. As I said, it really isn't a female lead, male lead film. They're all equally distributed in terms of screen time, I would say. But he was great. He was very, very surprising in terms of his depiction.
Yeah, I thought it'd be a very two-dimensional, I'm a really good guy. I'm not going to go into any details which could counter that. Maybe he's a really good guy. But it wasn't what I was expecting. There was layers to not the performance, there's layers to the character. And he felt original to this film and it felt original to Star Wars. And he's got really good chemistry with Felicity Jones. And the thing I like Diego Luna, he's done a few TV roles. I'm not going to sit there and say I know everything about him. I know almost nothing. But like I said, Jimmy Kimmel in interviews, he oozes confidence. He's really likable. And this film, you can tell that he's having a good time filming, although you don't see it in his character. There's something about him which is really impressive, and I want to see more of him. It's going to be one of those where he is a character where down the line you could even, obviously they're not going to do a prequel or sequel to Rogue One, but the way Marvel's going with their comics, you can easily jump, say, okay, let's have a Captain Andor. We're reading all the cast because there's so many names. You have an iPad with it. I'm just going to say that now if you keep thinking we're looking down.
It's a strange situation to be in as a Star Wars fan where you've got all this wealth of new names and planets you've got to memorize. So we're getting there, folks. We're getting there.
I loved him. And I think if you think of Captain Andor, you have to think of K2SO.
Yeah, and our new fully motion captured character played brilliantly by Alan Tudyk. He's fantastic just in everything, live action, voiceover, or motion capture. And I said this when I watched the trailers and some of the TV spots, like I knew that K2SO was going to be one of my favorite characters, and he absolutely is. He's everything you see in the trailer. He's the wisecracking, sarcastic, borderline sociopath droid. It's sort of like an evil mirror to C-3PO, I would say. For example, there are lines in the film where he's calculating the chances and probability of success, which is like C-3PO in Empire Strikes Back during the asteroid chase. But just some of his like off one-liners and his little quips that he'll throw out there. He's just fantastic, and I want to see some of the behind-the-scenes footage of this with him bringing his physicality into it as well, because he is quite a physical character, like how he moves, everything like that. He was fantastic, everything I wanted and more for K2SO.
He's got definitely some of the best lines of the film. Alan Tudyk is great in everything he's been in. He's done a robot before, iRobot. He played Sunny in it. It was excellent. This is very different, so I don't think they've just cast the Robot Man to do it twice. It was a very different performance, and I loved him. I know he filmed on stilts. There's all this funny behind-the-scenes stuff with him, but he's such a likable bloke, and that transitions into film. When they first announced K2SO, I was very... When his lines come in the trailers, they're like, don't be one of those where you try and be really funny. But every line he has works, and he's a delight. Every time he came on screen, it was welcome. It wasn't a hindrance. I'm not the biggest fan of C-3PO. I get it's his whole R2-D2 lining up there, opposites that are friends. But K2SO just stole it for me. He was absolutely amazing.
I think it was just how deadpan he played all the lines. Like from beginning to end, he's very deadpan. That's not a bad thing. That's just how the character is. But what I want to say about the characters as well, just all the actors in there, you can tell they were so enthusiastic about this project. Like, we are living in the age now that Disney's bought Star Wars, where people, who are directing it, who are starring in, are fans. Fans are directing these films now and starring in them, and you can tell that everyone cares about the property. And like for every film that comes out, you see them in interviews, and of course they've got to say they're into it and they're enthusiastic, but you can genuinely see that passion, I think, not just from the cast and the director, but the crew as well. People making the puppets, people like special effects, just everything. It's really, really nice, and you do see that passion come through on screen. We've got a lot more characters to get through. So Riz Ahmed playing a character called Bodhi Rook. We know him from Four Lions, which is one of my favourite comedy films. Great British comedy. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Very different performance. It just shows you what a diverse actor he is. He can play outright comedy. He was he was like a nervous character in this, and I'm not going to go into his backstory in this film or anything like that. I can't, because spoilers. But he was a nice character, and you are in the moments, in the action, you are behind him, and you want to see him succeed.
Yeah, and he's a character that he's not there for the sake of it. I've seen a lot of absolute morons talking about this film as multicultural because it's one of them pro PC.
Mm.
It's not that at all. Riz Ahmed is a fantastic, underrated actor. I'm going to add that as well.
Yeah, he is.
In this scene, he suits the character of Bodhi Rock. What happens with him, what transpires on screen. I'm not going to talk about it, like we said, it's spoilers. But like almost every character in this film, they meet for the necessity for the story to progress, and he is very key. They've kept him out of a lot of TV spot stuff like that. He is of the ensemble a minor one, but every minor character in the ensemble is still a major piece of the story. And I thought it was impressive, and I hope he breaks through in America. He was great in Nightcrawler. He's great in this. I hope there's more to come from him.
And I hope this film does kind of springboard all these actors' careers as well. I want to see more of Diego Luna. Donnie Yen, I haven't seen Ip Man, the Ip Man trilogy. You have. There was a scene in this movie, which is in the trailer, where Chirrut Imwe, Donnie Yen's character, has the staff and just knocks out a whole troop of stormtroopers. And then you said, that is why you need to watch Ip Man. For that, and if that's what Ip Man's like, I will definitely check that out. Him and his pairing with, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but Wen Yang, who plays Baze Malbus, I think they were dubbed at Celebration as the unofficial C-3PO and R2-D2 of this film.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'd go that far. They do have that like bromance and that connection with each other, but it's not in the same way as R2-D2 and C-3PO.
they're a Star Wars double act.
Yeah,
and I think they're probably the second one to ever have been like that, if you don't count Stitches, Crumb, and Jabba the Hutt.
yeah.
But they're very welcome, and each one benefits the other. I'm not going to talk about minor details, but obviously Donnie Yen's playing a blind character, and there's some very funny moments between the two of them, just their banter together. I'm not going to talk about their backstory, just in case you haven't seen or heard any of the celebration stuff, because it's not explored in the trailer. But Donnie Yen, if you haven't seen Ip Man, I can't recommend it enough. Absolutely incredible martial artist. When they announced this film, I said in our predictions earlier, I was so excited by Mads Mikkelsen and Donnie Yen. Donnie Yen delivered. We'll talk about Mads Mikkelsen later. I loved him, just in case you don't think I did. Donnie Yen was worth seeing. Every time he was on screen, I was captivated, and his pairing worked. I don't think he would have worked on his own. You needed both of them to be there for it to work, and he has the best line in the film.
He does. And one thing I will say about Donnie Yen is that, you know, he's a character that believes in the Force. You get that from the trailer. And at Celebration, we were told about this sort of like divide between the characters in terms of their perspective of the universe and things like that. I don't think the film really developed that as much as I was expecting. I would have liked to have seen a bit more interaction between the characters in terms of their, you know, their perspective on things. One believing in the Force, one being rather skeptical, kind of like Han Solo from A New Hope. I would have liked to see a little bit more of that. And I will say that in terms of Donnie Yen's actual character, he kind of has one trait, like he's a great fighter and he keeps talking about the Force. And that's really it. So it's very surface level characterization for those two, I would say. Not to say they're bad at all. I love those characters. I thought they were fantastic, but I would have liked a little bit more depth to them rather than sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for, like a
Two-dimensional,
like a motif, like, and they just run with it. Let's talk Krennic. Let's talk the Empire with this one. Ben Mendelsohn. I've only seen him in Dark Knight Rises.
I've seen him in Dark Knight Rises, a very, very underrated film with Ryan Gosling called Place Beyond the Pines. Very good film you haven't seen. However, for me, I used to say he was always going to be Taggart or whoever he is.
Yeah.
When he stepped up to Bane. I was so intrigued by this because if you think of Imperial, you think of Tarkin, you think of Darth Vader, you think of the Emperor. That's it. That's all there has been. Obviously, we've got Thrawn in Rebels now. Thrawn in the EU. He's absolutely incredible. Director Krennic has come in, and I fucking love him. I loved him in his interviews before the film. I was in the Celebration panel room. He walked past me with the two Death Troopers guarding him in character. That to me made him an instant screen legend, and he delivers on this in the film. He is everything you want in an evil villain of the Empire. Grand Moff Tarkin you can look at as the archetype British villain, but if some of the on-screen events that transpire with Ben Mendelsohn as Krennic, he's up there, and he will be up there for a long time. A very, very intriguing story arc, which I really can't delve into for many, many reasons, which we'll talk about another time. He has some of the standout scenes, I think I can say. Yeah. And ultimately, like every good villain, he's someone that has the right amount of screen time because you're left wanting more.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned like in terms of like Vader, Emperor, and you went through them all. I think Krennic's earned his place on that
Yeah.
list now. Also, the look, like the costume. Like we were at Celebration, they had all the costumes on display. We'd seen it in the trailer already, and it's just perfect. I mean, you talked about Thrawn as well, who wears that white uniform. But to see it actually on screen now in a different character, but like that kind of costume on screen, and he's got the cape as well. He talks about the cape in an interview on Jimmy Kimmel. Capes are awesome, and he just works it. And he's such a great actor as well because he's so different in everything you see him in. Like I know I've only seen him in Dark Knight Rises, and although there's like a kind of similar character motif, I would say between Daggett and Krennic, he just plays it so differently. And right from his first scene in the film, I knew he was going to be a villain to be reckoned with, and he absolutely is. I can't really say more than that at this point, so you have to stay tuned for our spoilers video at the weekend. Let's talk Forrest Whitaker. Again, can't really talk too much about this. Plays a character called Saw Gerrera, who has been in the Star Wars franchise before in terms of Clone Wars. I think he was in one episode. I'm not sure if I got to it. I think it's either season 4 or 5. Plays a sort of radical military leader for the rebels. And I think this character was probably one of the ones subjected to the most amount of reshoots. I don't really know what happened in the reshoots or which scenes they focused on, but I get the impression there was perhaps a little bit more to this character than we initially get in this theatrical cut of the film.
He's a character I've seen all of. Actually, I say all of. I've seen the entirety of Clone Wars except the lost episodes, which is their season name. I'm not going to pay 40 quid for a German import of them. When they announced Saw Gerrera, I'm not going to lie, I knew his character in Rebels, but when someone said Saw Gerrera, I didn't recognize the name until I saw his face and got the story arc. Very similar in this, transpires across, more integral to the opening third of the film than I thought he'd be. That's not spoiling anything, that's just saying that he's a character that you expect to be in a few scenes, given the sort of stature of the character, his trailer opinions.
He sort of propels the story into motion, doesn't he?
To myself, he's got a bigger role than I thought he would do, which is testament again to the writing, telling of a story. And he's got a very intriguing setup. I think is the right word for him. He's, I think, one of the characters you can talk about the least because of what he does in terms of spoilers. Forrest Whitaker, a very different Forrest Whitaker performance.
Yeah,
I'm not going to sound bad, but I'm very shocked they managed to get him to play that character. I'm not going to say money talking. He might have been intrigued, but it certainly wasn't what I thought it'd be. If that makes any sense.
He had a very strange way of his persona in the film was very different from what I thought it was going to be in trailers. If anyone's seen I'm not sure what year it came out, the Predators film with Adrian Brody, I thought he was going to be a lot like the oh god, what's his name? Morpheus from the Matrix, Lawrence Fishburne character, who's kind of like this, military guy who'd gone a little bit crazy, was a little bit, and I guess he is similar to that, but just in terms of how he plays it, like his voice, just his mannerisms, everything like that, and even like the character design itself and some of the quirks he has really wasn't what I was expecting. I think I'm going to have another few views of this film to really cement how I feel about his character. But he does propel the story, and that's all I can really say at the minute. Questionable. Not really sure how I feel about his character. However, I do know how I feel about Galen Erso, played by Mads Mikkelsen. Mads Mikkelsen, I will say, is one of the best actors working in the business. I've seen season 1 of Hannibal. Thought he was one of the best Bond villains with Le Chiffre. And he's just a really intimidating character. And he's not really intimidating in this film. He's playing like I can't go into it with spoilers, I guess, but he plays Jin's father. That's been released before. And there's a hell of a lot going on with this character that we learn and discover as the film goes on, which really kind of changes your perception of the entire Star Wars saga from this point. And he gets a lot of emotional scenes, and it's a side to Mads Mikkelsen I haven't really seen in his acting before. I know he's done a lot of things. I've only seen the 2 things I mentioned, but there was a genuinely heartfelt moment in this film where you almost get a little bit misty-eyed. I thought he played it beautifully.
I can neither say he's a hero nor a villain.
Yeah.
Because of spoilers. However, I can say this is, if anything, the most, not different, but this is one of the most unique Mads Mikkelsen performances. Look at the Chief, you can pull a page out of Hannibal, you can pull a page out of Howlers and Clash of the Titans. There's that edge of evilness about him. You see a very different performance that I don't think he's given. Even Doctor Strange two-dimensional bad guy. Nothing like that. In his scenes, he obviously has the presence as Mikkelsen always does. He got the loudest cheer at the Rogue One panel, and I can see why he's a worthy addition to the Star Wars universe. And again, this is just the strength and depth of this cast, because obviously he's Jin's father. He isn't a part of the... I was going to call them the Suicide Squad, then that's what I call them in the cinema. These are the real Suicide Squad, the Rogue One team. But obviously he's not part of their setup or the main ensemble, so it just shows that depth in the supporting characters is absolutely incredible. And he's someone that, to cast that role, you needed someone with a reputation. You just someone that can give you a decent performance, and they nailed it.
Yeah, he is an integral character in this film, and that's all we can say, and to the franchise in general. And really, there's only one other character we can talk about, returning character, Darth Vader. James Earl Jones is back to do the voice. I can't remember the guy who's actually dressed up as him in this one. It's a new person, but James Earl Jones, to hear that voice again. Now, he is older, and as you said before recording, in the longer sentences when he talks, you can hear that age to his voice, and it doesn't quite have the impact it does in the original trilogy, but it's still Vader. Like, it's still recognizably Vader when he talks, and just to see Vader on the big screen again, especially with some of the things he does in this film, with that voice coming out, it's fantastic to watch. And there are moments in this where you see Vader where it does make you feel like you are watching the original trilogy for the first time again.
And one thing I think I said in our predictions going into this, the voice of Vader in Star Wars Rebels, there's a very distinct, different sound to Darth Vader. It's still James Earl Jones, which is awesome. However, they don't necessarily edit the voice sound precisely like he does in Star Wars, the whole original trilogy. However, my one bit of confidence was that they did edit it to sound like that. So especially in more of his normal sentences, I suppose you could say, it sounds exactly like it did in episode 4, 5, 6. I know that's such a nitpicky thing to say, but it's true, and that was quite important to me because it's just the authenticity of it being obviously tied into the main franchise. But every time he spoke, that's when everyone's listening the most. Every word he said, you take in. And as a vocal performance, again, I can't give you details of the words he says because of spoilers, but he is easily one of the most, not iconic because he's already iconic before this film came out, but he's certainly one of the more interesting characters. They were all interesting, but everyone wants to know why Vader's in this, what Vader does to get him to where he is at the start of episode 4. James Earl Jones is amazing in this. I almost said a scene description, which I can't do. We'll talk about that vaguely later on, but again, it just epitomizes the strength of this cast. James Earl Jones, we've spoke about him last, and we've already spoken about 9 other people first. Normally, it'd be the other way around.
And he still commands that presence on screen. And like from the opening, I think the amount of screen time he has in this film is perfect. Like, you don't want to give him too much screen time; it would detract from the new characters. Like, for example, Ben Mendelsohn's Krennic is still at the forefront, and Vader's kind of there in the background, and that's what you want, especially if you're watching these in chronological order. You don't want to have too much Vader. You want to save it for his proper dramatic reveal in A New Hope. But no, it was great just seeing about. He talked about authenticity as well in terms of the voice. The costume as well, straight out of A New Hope. Like, if people, like the hardcore Star Wars fans know this, the eyes on the original costume had a red tint to them. That's back. And also sort of like how the helmet goes onto the rest of the body. It looks like they'd used the costume they had lying around from A New Hope still. And just tying that together to the original trilogy, it was just fantastic. So,
and it wasn't even polished. Look at episode 5. He comes out polished. That's the best looking Darth Vader suit.
Voodoo hide.
Yeah, in this they just have that episode 4 vibe. Even the chain around his collar there, you don't see that because you don't see in episode 4. So it was really cool that they could have done episode 3 and had him shiny and chrome, but instead they went for the pre-episode 4 because he has to look like that, and it worked. So there's a lot of credit for them nailing that.
Definitely. So that takes us through our cast. Let's talk the music. So, new composer on this one, we have, oh God, I've forgotten his name.
Michael Giacchino.
Michael Giacchino, thank you, who has scored many, many film soundtracks in the recent years, and he's very, very good at taking styles and concepts from other composers and working it into his own and matching that tone, and he absolutely does in this one. I was at work today, heard the soundtrack playing, and right there I could have swore it was just John Williams had done the music. There are some new themes established in this one. We get Krennic's theme, we get Jin's theme. Brilliant soundtrack. I'm going to have to listen to it on its own, I think,
Yeah.
because I've only listened to it in the movie, which is great. But with film soundtracks like this, it's also good to listen to it on its own. I think it's a solid soundtrack. I do, and considering I think you said he only had 2 months to work on this. Originally, the music was going to be done by Alexandre Desplat, and I'm sure he would have done a fantastic soundtrack. But I think that Giacchino brings that connective tissue to the sounds and stylings of John Williams, which is welcome in a film like this.
Yeah, I mean, last year, did we say it was like the year of Giacchino?
Yeah.
Inside Out, Jurassic World, almost everything. Did he do Mission Impossible? I don't know on that, but everything he did was just amazing. And I've said for a long time, I've never said it on the podcast, but to me, he was someone, if they couldn't get Williams back, it should have gone straight to Giacchino. And fair play to Disney. Desplat pulled out. Giacchino, the click of the fingers. He said before, everyone says that they've always wanted to do Star Wars. Look at most composers say they're inspired. You can always, anyone says it the most, it's worthy to him because he plays the most like John Williams, who uses brass instruments and strings rather than focusing on the smaller things. And he does suit the Star Wars. I need to listen to it properly a few more times. Obviously, there's no crawl, so there is no theme. That's a really tough thing to take in, especially when it comes up a long time ago. But some of his score works, and I like what he did. There's a lot of originality to a pre-existing theme, as such you could say, with a lot of it. So it's really cool to see his interpretations of Star Wars, and I hope he comes back for more of them. I would love to see him do an episode film of John Williams. Can't because he's good enough, and I bet you that's Disney's long-term plan.
Yeah, and I mean, he is part of the Disney family. He scored Doctor Strange. He's scoring the new Spider-Man film, so it looks like Disney do want to keep him around. And I mean, if you can churn out this music in 2 months, that's fantastic. That, making this music in 2 months is just completely alien to me. But yeah, absolutely. I think they will be looking for that next composer after Williams that will want to stay with the franchise as it goes on, rather than jumping around to different composers all the time. I guess all we can finish off on this spoiler-free one is our favourite scene. We won't say it. If we have a spoiler-free-ish scene, it's going to be very difficult, and we'll do our overall recommendations. So I think we're in agreement on our favourite scene, but with as little spoilers as you can.
There's a pivotal scene of the film with Darth Vader. That's all I can say. I will not tell you if he does or doesn't use the Force. I can't say if he doesn't or doesn't use the lightsaber. I can't say if he does or doesn't talk or breathe. Well, obviously, he breathes because he'd be dead. When you see this film, you will understand why I've said that. A pivotal scene of Darth Vader is not just the greatest scene of Rogue One. It's Darth Vader's greatest scene. Maybe second, pushing second, maybe top. And it's certainly one of the best scenes ever in Star Wars. I will say that after one viewing. I will say that after 2 viewings. I might even change after 20 and say it's the best. But my gosh, the cinema. For people that didn't like the film, they spoke of this scene.
Yeah. I was almost in complete and utter shock. Now, if you watched our predictions video, we did allude to something involving Vader that we'd heard rumors about. This was absolutely that, and it did not disappoint at all. I was on the edge of my seat. I don't even know how long the sequence is. It's probably a minute, if that. But what a wonderful minute it is. So we can't say more about that. I'm sure on our spoiler discussion, we'll be talking a lot more about that with Phil and Dave. So I guess we'll round out with overall recommendation. George, Rogue One, a Star Wars story. What do you reckon?
Of course, I'm going to say go watch it. I would say go watch a Transformers film. So that's everything you need to know. I'm not going to sit here and rank it alongside another Star Wars film. It needs time. Still to myself, not enough time to pass an episode 7 to even rank that with the other 6. And this is a spin-off film as well. So I can talk about in terms of filmmaking. It's a very, very well put together film with some of the strongest action scenes I've seen in a long time. Perfect integration of practical effects and CGI. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's ballsy as well. People may have different opinions. We've already seen it's been mixed upon audience that we've seen it with, whether or not that was just our place. But it's certainly a film that you should watch, especially for that pivotal scene with Darth Vader. I would pay £100 to see that again.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly the same. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're clearly going to go and see this midnight or the first day anyway. It's definitely a film to watch on the big screen. We talked about we went to see it in 3D. We can talk a little bit about 3D if you like. I don't know if it was our projector or what it was, but I'm glad you pointed it out. On our projector, at least, it kind of looked mirrored, so it looked like everything was doubled.
And that was the first maybe 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it cleared up, but it was I wouldn't say we're at a low angle, but I had my Death Trooper 3D glasses on, and then I immediately swapped it for my normal ones, which I've always had, and it was arguably worse on them. So I'm wondering it was either the angle or the projector. So even getting rid of that, there were no mesmerizing 3D. It looked awesome in the space battle. Space to always it's great in 3D. There was no Death Super Star Destroyer poking you in the eye. There was a cool reveal shot of it.
Mm.
The 3D search you can avoid. Haven't seen IMAX yet. I will be seeing it in IMAX, but I would assume IMAX is the absolutely incredible for this.
Yeah, definitely. It is more that depth 3D, which wasn't a problem in this because there are a lot of moments like the space battle which do utilize that depth really well. You do get the classic Star Destroyer coming out of the camera, not quite as spectacularly as Force Awakens, but no, overall recommendation. I love all the performances. I will say the first 20 minutes or so of the film, it does take a while to find its footing. It's a lot of hopping around from place to place. There's no real sort of like narrative drive in the first bit. And as a newcomer, without that crawl, you do find yourself trying to catch up with a lot of the things that are going on. And I think it would have benefited with a little bit of backstory given. But after you hit that point, once the adventure starts, you're there with the characters on the edge of your seat. If you're a Star Wars fan, you know the outcome, but you want to see how this plays out anyway. And I do think that this is an important story to be told in the Star Wars franchise. Now, whether the Han Solo spin-off movie will be with the origin of him, that's undecided. But if Disney put as much work into their spin-off films as they have done with this, then by all means, keep making them. And I keep saying this, I'm sure in a good few years' time, when Star Wars is just oversaturated, I'll be like, oh, can we have a little, a few more years gap in between movies? But right now, I'm just loving it. I agree with you. I don't think enough time has passed even on episode 7, and the same will be with this. I'm probably going to see this another 2 or 3 times over the weekend. Absolutely. But my initial opinion right now is I had a great time. It's thoroughly entertaining. I preferred it to Force Awakens. I know that's quite controversial, but I thought that in terms of the originality in it, the performances, and just the energy to the story, I thought was a lot better than Force Awakens. But yeah, that's my overall recommendation. So that'll do it for our review on Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this film. Try and keep the comments in this video spoiler free if you can, because you know that some people don't get to see the film until a week after, and be respectful of other Star Wars fans that might not get to see it. So anything you like, please do drop us a comment. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, there'll be a lot more reaction videos from me, more movie reviews, and just because we've done our review on this, don't let that fool you. We are still very much in Star Wars month. As we said, we'll have our spoiler discussion video coming in a few days' time. More top 10 lists, a brand new Battle of the Brackets episode, which I think we can announce is greatest Star Wars moment. We will also be taking this film into consideration. I'm sure we're going to be fighting for a particular scene in this film. So yeah, a lot more stuff to come. Please do hit that subscribe button. It is the best way to keep updated with all of our content. And until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.